Go ahead and start recording. All right. Hope everybody had a good holiday. Now it's time to get ready for Christmas. So I hope everybody's got all your shopping done, or at least you're on your way, so we can concentrate on the last lap. We got 2 more meetings after tonight. Tonight we're doing finance and education. We've talked around it a couple of times. I've got some different PowerPoints tonight. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. You can look at those. I'll editorialize a little bit as I normally do, but that's where we are, is on week 12. Let's see. For our evidence artifacts, you should be finishing up the skip fairly quickly, the first 2 tasks of the skip. And I've already covered skips task 1 and 2. Next week, I've already covered task 1, but I will recover task 1 again next week as we move to your final task for the semester, 7th and final task for this semester, which is CAP task 1. I'll cover it again for you next week to make sure that we get it done. Anybody have any questions on the evidence artifacts? You should have wrapped up your OMA by now, submitted it for evaluation. There were some questions about, is there a place in Blackboard for you to put your score? There isn't. I get those. I know what your scores are. So I just have to have the individual tasks so I can give you a grade for them, but I know what your scores are, and I know who's got them and who hadn't, so we won't worry about that. But continue on, finish up your skip as quickly as you can so you can start CAP at least by next week, so we can get that in and be done with it, and get everything out for the semester by December the 9th. December 9th is our target date to have everything done. So you kind of need to have everything in by about the 4th if you can. If you can't, I'll cover it next week, and then you'll have 5 more days after that. So we should be good. Questions on evidence artifacts? If not, this is a very long 59-slide PowerPoint, and it covers a myriad of issues, financing and education. I'm not going to go through all this, but what I will say is this. I'll remind you that North Carolina had a landmark case. We covered it earlier in the year during the relevant court cases for education since 1954, the Brown versus Board of Education decision. And that case was the Leandro case. Leandro was a North Carolina financing case. North Carolina uses a flat funding formula without recapture. And what that means is whether you're in Murphy or whether you're in Manteo, if you are a public school entity, the state gives you a per pupil amount of money for the year. Please remember, they don't give it to you all at one time. Let's say it's $7,000. They give you 10 installments of $700 for that student. And remember, the state only reimburses what you've spent, so you have to have enough money in your reserves to run school for at least a month as a school district, and then the state reimburses that money, but they only reimburse the students who showed up. Remember that. They don't pay for the number that are on the roll. They pay for only the attendance. So that's why Power School attendance is so important. It's about your money. So they pay for the number of students that showed up in your district for a month on the principal's monthly report. When that's filed, they send the money back, and they spend 1/10 of the money per month for 10 months, and that's how you get your money. Now, the issue then becomes in financing of education, not the accounting part of it or the particulars of how it's sent or when it's sent, but how much is sent. That's an issue as well. And that's what the Leandro case was about. The low wealth districts sued the state and said, your funding formula is not equitable. It's even, it's equal, but it's not equitable. And what they meant is that local districts have the ability to fund education at various levels based on local wealth. And that, for example, let's say you are in Perquimans, and which is a low wealth district in the far northeastern part of the state. They don't have the ability to add very much to the state budget. But what if you're in Charlotte-Mecklenburg and your local has the ability to say, let's say, $2,000 extra on the $7,000 the state gives? So in effect, what happens is Charlotte-Mecklenburg spends $9,000 per pupil, and that's about right. And Perquimans spends $7,000 because they only have the state money. So what the low wealth districts did in the Leandro case is they sued the state and said, what you should do is give them $6,000, give us that extra $1,000 to make us 8. Now they're 6. They add their 2 locally and they're 8, and we're all the same. And that would be equity. Let me run through that math again. Right now, the state gives $7,000 for Perquimans. The state gives $7,000 in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. The low wealth districts proposed that the state give them 8, give Charlotte-Mecklenburg 6. So they'd take $1,000 from Charlotte-Mecklenburg and give to them, and they would have 8. Charlotte-Mecklenburg would now have 6, but since they could add $2,000 locally, they'd have 8 as well. And everybody would have 8 that way. But the Leandro case was decided against the low wealth districts. And the only thing that was done is they said, all right, we'll start a lottery and we'll give you the opportunity to request some of that money to do some capital needs in pork barrel fashion according to the policy of that. And in the end, not much has come of the lottery money because there's not much of it. And what has been pretty much wasted on pork barrel projects. So in the end, the funding, although it might be equal, many would argue that it's not equitable. And there's a long history behind that. That's what this particular PowerPoint speaks to, all of those different issues from long ago. You can take time and work through it. It would take me an hour to go through it, and so I'll let you do that on your own. The one that I do want to go through with you, though, is
Hey, Dr. Lamb.
yes.
I have a question about that because you're saying that it's 10 installments of $700 to get the money. Is there a number of days per month that a student has to be in school for you to get that full 700?
No.
Because
No. What they do is they take the percentage that 20 days. They take the number of students that were in school and they send you that much money. In terms of they add those 20 days up. They add those 20 days up and divide it by 20, and that gives you a percentage of that 700 that you get per student. It's usually around 95%. So if you had 95%, you get 95% of that 7,000 for each of those students.
Because I was trying to figure out basically how, because a lot of times suspension is not an option. They're going to try to figure out a cost to them, keep them in school, and now I'm starting to understand why.
Yeah. Every day that a kid's not in school, you don't get paid for that kid that day. That's 1/20th of that $700 is gone.
Wow.
That's correct. So now you see why administrators don't want to suspend kids. Now, I'm not going to argue that. I am not going to argue that suspension is a good thing for the kid, but I will argue that it's a good thing for everybody else sometimes. And I've had to tell parents that. You know, and parents would say to me, well, it's not a good thing for my kid to be suspended. I said, I'm not telling you it is, but the rest of us need to break. And so sometimes, and obviously suspension is not good for the school district. And that's why school districts want to start PBIS programs and do other things to try to keep kids in school. It's the right thing to do educationally for the kid, but it's also a money issue. There is no threshold in terms of if a kid attends at least 15 of the 20, you get the full money. Nope. Every day that kid doesn't come, you get 1/20th less of that $700 for that kid that month. Every day costs you. Every day costs you money. Every day costs you money. Let me see who's texting me. Okay, I'm having to send a student a text. All right. So that's why it costs you money every day. Every day, every day. So that's why we try to keep kids in school. It's the right thing to do for them, but it's also the right thing in terms of getting money for the district. And that's why they do that. All right. Good question. Other questions about financing, about state funds? All right. Let's look at the public finance context. This is a short one. The federal system source of revenue for school. Local school districts, as I've told you, primarily get their money. Local money comes from property taxes. The state government, when we're talking about when the local hires teachers or the capital budget for buildings and grounds, where do they get that money from? Property taxes. And so when you lose businesses, or in North Carolina's, in the case of North Carolina, what we do quite stupidly is when we give all these tax incentives for businesses to come to our district or come to our county, guess who in the end pays the price for that? That would be public schools. Let me say that again. When you have a Facebook, like in Rutherford County, when you have Facebook come and put a data server plant in your county that hires basically nobody other than a few minimum wage custodian and security people, because it's just a server farm, but you give them these huge tax breaks, that's money straight from schools. That's exactly where that money doesn't come to, is the school system, because that's where most of school revenue comes from corporate property taxes. Let me say that again. Most of school revenue comes from corporate property taxes. Homeowner property taxes pay for things for everybody, like fire and police and the water supply, the water company, and all those kinds of public services that counties have to provide. That's what homeowner property taxes cover. Money that goes to help fund schools and keep up the capital needs of schools in terms of buildings and ground, and maybe hire an extra teacher or two here or there, that comes from corporate property taxes. So every time you see one of these deals, whereas some county in the state's got some corporate entity coming in and they've given them these tax incentives, that's coming straight out of the school budget. That's where that's coming from. So that's why you can be corporations rich and school poor. Some states don't do it that way, but North Carolina does. Primarily property taxes pay for local school districts, and primarily corporate property taxes. State government gets their money one of two ways, or both, from sales tax and income tax. The states that don't do income tax, like Florida, they up their income tax, their sales tax, but North Carolina has both. And then the federal government gets theirs through income taxes. That's where the money comes from to fund schools. That's where the revenue primarily comes from. Assessing and understanding taxation. Tax yield equals the tax rate times the tax base. Again, the rate is set by the county or the city that you live in, or like me, the city and the county. My primary residence, I have two homes. One of them is in a county that I'm not in the city limits, and so I only pay county taxes there. My home that I'm at now in Mecklenburg County, I have to pay Cornelius town taxes, and I have to pay County of Mecklenburg taxes on my property taxes. Now, tax base is real property. The problem with that, and where that goes wrong again, is when we give all those corporate incentives. You can have a lot of corporations, big buildings, a lot of real property in a district, but if they've been given tax incentives to move there, then they are not part of the tax base. And so that makes the rate go up for everybody else. So what happened in Rutherford County, where I own a home, when Facebook moved in, my taxes went up. Let me say that again. When Facebook moved in, not only did the schools have more money and those things, because they gave them tax breaks and because they bought the property and improved it for them to build their plant on, we had to pay for that. So my taxes went up. Schools got less and I paid more. I wouldn't have mind paying more if it had gone to the schools, but it went straight to Facebook people. They became, Facebook had more millionaires and the billionaires got even richer. So they do not participate in the tax base. And so the tax rate has to go up for everybody else. Not a fan of Facebook, as you might understand, since they're costing me a couple $100 more a year. Again, the criteria for evaluating taxes, this is for the local, in terms of how much you should be getting for your local schools. The tax base, again, corporations have figured out, we'll hold everybody hostage. We won't come unless you don't make us part of the tax base. And so they're not part of the tax base. The yield, again, the yield is the base times the rate. Equity, we've spoken to that. There is, there should be some equity between corporate and income, corporate property taxes and personal property taxes, homeowner property taxes. There's got to be some equity. What's happened in cases like in Rutherford County, there is no equity, and the homeowners are bearing an unusually high brunt of the taxes there, and the schools are declining, and they've got a community college, and they can't keep it up as well. It has over $50 million in physical needs. Everybody understands that we have 58 community and technical colleges in North Carolina, and they're at the trough, right along with public schools, for county money, not just state money, but Isothermal Community College goes to the county commissioners just like the Rutherford County schools do, and ask for money for physical needs on their campus, for capital needs, buildings and grounds. Remembering that there are 58 of those in the state of North Carolina, and there's probably only need for about 25 of them, but we have 58. We didn't build them because we needed them. We built them because the people running things in the state of North Carolina, when we got out of building school buildings as a state in 1966, said, wait a minute, we got to have some way to keep making billions of dollars. So we started building community and technical colleges, and we didn't quit until we built 58. And the problem with that is we have way too many for the number of students that we potentially have, number one. But number two, in a real sense, just like in Rutherford County, our problem there is that all of those 58 community and technical colleges are 50 years. The youngest one is 50 years old this year, and the oldest one is 60 years old this year. The one in Rutherford County is 52 or 3 years old. All the buildings are that old. Can you imagine the capital needs? When the new president took over last year, he did an assessment he had a professional group come in and assess, and they found $55 million worth of capital needs. But Facebook don't pay. So, but they're standing there in line right along with the school system, needing money for capital improvements and keeping their buildings up over at community college. But again, on the equity side, North Carolina has decided that there will be no equity, that we'll let the corporations kind of negotiate the best that they can. And if schools don't get any money, then schools just don't get any money. That we want the jobs so badly. But in the case of Facebook, we got so few jobs, it really didn't pay off. And so now the county's in very dire financial straits. Economic effects of the tax, and that's what I've been talking about. There's this notion that if we don't charge them any taxes, they'll come and provide jobs. You got to know what you're getting. High tech means low jobs, low number of jobs. I don't know why folks can't understand that. Every time you hear high tech, what that means is we're going to be able to have fewer workers. And so you bring in a Facebook, they employ 15 people from the county. That'd be 15. And they're all minimum wage jobs. Administration and compliance. And so tax base, the which a tax rate is applied is wealth, income, consumption, and privilege. And so what we're talking about here, is that the state gets the income tax. The local has to be concerned with property tax, and that would be wealth and not income. Not consumption, that's sales tax. And privilege is like luxury tax on big items. So what we're talking about is local wealth. And so if we take the corporate people out of that, you can understand that homeowners have to bear an inequitable amount of that brunt in taxation. The amount of tax revenue a tax will produce. The goal is broad-based taxes with low rates for everybody. Well, that's the goal. But if you exempt corporations, then you're really going to have some problems there. Now, the tax overhaul from the feds will also have, as small businesses have to pay less tax, or businesses have to pay less tax, federal income tax. Part of that thought is that will allow local taxing authorities to increase their taxes on these people so that there'll be more local money. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but that's part of the trickle-down effect. That's supposedly. Now, I'm old enough to have lived through the first round of trickle-down economics. It didn't work that time. That's not just my opinion. Now, I'm not saying it won't work this time, but the idea here is if we eliminate some or reduce some of the federal income taxes on corporations and businesses, then locals will be able to increase the property taxes on them, and which speaks to local control. They'll be able to get more money for their local school districts. That's the idea. That's part and parcel of what people would tell you about is the theory of trickle-down economics. Because the federal government takes less money from them, the local can then pick up, and you can use that money schools locally. It didn't happen the first time. I don't know if it'll happen this time or not, but the best prediction of the future is the past, and so I wouldn't be gambling that that's going to happen. But in theory, that's what's supposed to be happening, because what's happening in North Carolina is happening all across America in terms of funding for schools, and the local districts just aren't able to afford it. And so part of that notion of cutting corporate income taxes is to be able for the local then to increase the property taxes so that they won't have to go up on the rate on homeowners to bear the brunt of paying for school. So that's and here are some other theories in terms of equity. Who actually pays the tax, and that's what I've been talking about. Economic effects. The goal is a neutral impact on the economy, and that's what trickle down is pretty much about. And here are some other things about how you collect it. Okay, so if you're funded by income taxes, again, that's the federal government, and that's what we're talking about. And that's why we're talking about broadening the base, reducing the rate, so that we can sales tax. Again, that's how state gets its revenue. Property tax is how the local. And so the idea here is to decrease federal income tax so that the local can increase local property tax on businesses and take some of the burden off homeowners. And in effect, that would mean that the middle class would get a raise, would get a break. It wouldn't come directly from the United States federal government, but by giving businesses a federal tax break, local municipalities would be able to do a more equitable job of taxing them locally, taking some of the burden off middle income taxpayers, middle class taxpayers, and that schools would be able to get their money in a more and we've done it in a more equitable fashion. Now that's the theory. I'm still waiting for that trickle down from the 80s. Of course, I'm waiting for my hair to grow back too. I don't know which one will happen first. But if you want to know, again, and that's kind of how the tax structure works. In today's society, it might not be too smart to be as outspoken as I am if you're still in the public school sector. But I wouldn't be spending any of that money that's supposed to be coming from this federal tax relief for corporations. I wouldn't be spending any of that money because I'm not sure it's ever going to trickle down to the local. They're going to corporate taxes at the local level, which goes directly again to schools. And then the analysis on lotteries. They were first introduced in New Hampshire in '64, a small portion of education revenues. Lotteries are a tax. General agreement lotteries are a regressive tax. That means that they're worse on poor people. Revenue is shown to be relatively unstable. The revenues flatten out over time due to high administrative costs, advertising and selling the tickets and the prizes. Not much money left after you pay everybody. Everybody that's got a lottery kiosk in their business, they got to get money. People that win got to get money. That idiot that wears those costumes and advertises Tuesday on TV, those TV ads for the lottery, they cost money. And the TV stations get all that revenue. They like that. And by the time that it all comes down to the end, there's just no money left from the lottery. In terms of real money for education. As I said, if somebody's up in, is it Stokes or Surrey? I think it might have been Surrey. They built a cafeteria up at the high school up there so that all 300 kids could eat lunch at one time. And I was like, are you kidding me? That's one of the most wasteful things I ever heard of. It was a complete pork barrel project. There's nothing wrong. They had to have 2 lunch shifts. I was like, I was high school principal. And I had 4 lunch shifts. And your point is, they wanted them all to be able to eat lunch at the same time. Well, that really matters about quality education. That everybody can eat lunch at the same time. See, that's what I'm not. Even what little money has trickled down has mostly been wasted. Just been pork barrel projects like that. So in the end, the Leandro case that was supposed to reinvent public education in North Carolina ended up not even being a tempest in a teapot. It wasn't anything. It didn't end up being anything. We were going to get a lottery because a lot of people make money on the lottery, but it was never, we hid behind, this is a way we'll be able to take care of this inequity in school funding. No, it was just people wanted the lottery because a lot of people getting wealthy from the lottery, but not school people. So that's the notion of what was going on with the lottery. I have one more. It talks about the future. And it's not a very rosy picture for public school in terms of funding. It's going to, again, we're going to go. Looks like we're going to go through another cycle of trickle down that we went through in the '80s. That put a lot of money out of public education. It drove salaries to be frozen. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember, but I was teaching school at the time, and my salary was frozen for a number of years. Because the trickle down the big the corporate tax relief did not trickle down to the locals, and they didn't hire more people, and so the state's income tax didn't go up, and the state couldn't pay salaries, so they had to freeze salaries. So the first round of trickle down did not work at all. In North Carolina, it was a disaster for us. So I can only tell you what I lived through one time, and I didn't hear about it. I lived it, so I know. And I became a principal toward the end of that, and I had to be the one to tell teachers every year, no, you're not getting a raise. No, there's no supplies for you, and no, we can't do any more fundraisers because I can't get them approved because they're concerned about taking wealth out of you're competing with local businesses who are struggling to get by. Can't do those things. And so, it didn't work for education the first time. I'm not sure it will work this time, but I've got a slideshow here for you that kind of summarizes where we are going forward. It's a very quick one. And it's not a rosy picture. But I hope in the end, what you've taken from this is you understand the basics of funding, and you understand that national, state, and local politics all play a vital role in what funds schools. We get funds from all three of those, but there's also, as I've tried to explain tonight, there's an interrelationship between those things. We give corporates, in theory, we give corporations a tax break. They hire more people, generate more state income. We get more money for schools coming per pupil. The local then, because these people are now paying less corporate tax, are then able to increase the rate on them and pull more money for the locals in terms of capital for buildings and grounds because they're paying less federal income tax. They're now able to pay more local property tax, and they can become a player in the property tax sweepstakes to fund public schools. That's the theory. So it's not just we get money from these three separate entities. There's also a relationship between those three in terms of how schools end up. What the federal government does in fact have an impact on what the local does in terms of getting local funds. And so you can't just separate them out. But as you can see from the lottery, that was the state's big play to get more money. That was going to increase $2,000 or $3,000 a pupil, the amount of money that the state was going to be able to throw into the school funding mix. It's not been $2 or $3. It didn't work out that way. So the future is still going to be dependent upon a lot of economic conditions. But just because you have some prosperity does not mean that money is going to come trickling down to schools. It didn't before. There was some prosperity in the '80s, but it didn't come trickling down. We found other ways to divert it away. So hopefully this time around we learned our lesson the first time around, and hopefully some of that money will come to public schools because I know schools are struggling. That's one of the reasons why I had you learn about fundraising in your district and what the rules were. You're going to have to get out and try to raise you some money to have just the normal things that you should have in your schools. I believe that's going to become, it's already a big thing that's going to be more and more of that. There was a time when we had politicians in this state talking about that we were going to fund schools at such a level that we'd never have to do fundraising again. I hope there's a little corner of it's a little bit hotter for those people that told that lie. I don't know. But yes, that was a common theme back in the 80s, that we were going to, this trickle down was going to create such a booming economy that we wouldn't, we'd quit having to have candy and wrapping paper sales. It didn't happen. And so you need to know that you're going to have to try to figure out ways to raise you some money locally, especially for kids and school supplies that need them, and teacher supplies in their rooms. I don't see the truck backing up to your building anytime soon with a bunch of money on it or a bunch of supplies. So that's kind of why I had you do that. You need to know what the rules are, because it's going to be part and parcel of what you do. And my final point tonight, PTA and PTO. PTA is a national organization. We don't usually have those in North Carolina because those are associated with union states. PTO is what we have in North Carolina, which is a right to work state, which is not affiliated with anything. And even though you might allow the PTO to do your fundraising as a school, you will be responsible as the principal for fiscal control to make sure the money is accounted for by the same way that it is if it were coming straight to the school. So make sure you understand that. If you have a PTO and your principal says, well, we just delegated that responsibility to them and they do all our fundraising, you can delegate the activity, but you can't delegate the responsibility for fiscal control that goes along with that. So please remember, unless you have a PTA, if you just have a PTO, they're not a real organization. They only function as a committee of your school, and you're responsible for their financial dealings. So you need to remember that. Questions about financing education? All right. My time is about up. I don't want to keep you too much. Work on knockout skip 1 and 2 and cap 1. I'll cover cap 1 again next week when we meet. We got 2 more times. We're almost to the end. Don't give up now. As you can see, I'm just about ready. My first Santa Claus gift is this coming Sunday. I'm ready. I've been doing my part. So I've been eating well and growing this beard, so I'm doing well. So I hope that you are too. And I will see you all next week.